You've seen them your whole life. Long, black, shredded strips of rubber lying along the side of the highway. The ones truckers call road gators. You've swerved around them without thinking, and you probably figured you knew exactly where they came from. Cheap retreads, recapped tires. The budget rubber that big rigs run to save a few dollars, blowing itself apart in the summer heat. Here's the thing. That is the single most common belief about road gators, and it is almost entirely wrong. Those strips of rubber mostly aren't retread failures at all. When the government actually studied them, the majority turned out to come from brand new tires. And the real cause has nothing to do with cheap rubber. It's something a driver did, or didn't do, hours or even days before that tire ever came apart. It's a heat problem, and it has a name: tread separation. And by the end of this, you'll understand why the exact same kind of tire everyone blames for the mess on the shoulder is the tire trusted to land a fully loaded jumbo jet, and how one invisible number decides whether any truck tire lives or dies. So let's get into it. What actually is a gator? If it isn't cheap retreads, what's really shredding these tires? Why do they show up most in the summer? Why are they almost always truck tires, and almost always the ones on the trailer? Why does a tire that runs fine for hours suddenly let go at highway speed? And how can the same retreaded tire everyone points at be the same technology holding a landing jumbo jet off the runway? Here's what everyone gets wrong. We picture a tire failing like a balloon popping, a sudden defect, bad rubber giving way all at once. But that is not what a gator is. A gator is the belt package, the tread and the steel belts underneath it, peeling away from the body of the tire in one long piece. And the number one thing that causes that peeling is not cheap manufacturing, it's heat. So here's the key idea to hold on to for the rest of this. A truck tire's real enemy is heat. Every single time the tire rolls, it flexes, and that flexing generates heat, the same way bending a paperclip back and forth makes it warm. As long as the tire has the correct air pressure for the weight it's carrying, that flexing stays within limits, and the tire can run for hours, even in brutal summer temperatures, with no problem at all. But let the air pressure drop, or pile on too much weight, and the tire starts to flex too much. It builds heat faster than it can shed it. And the bond holding those belts to the body slowly cooks until it lets go. That is tread separation. The tire didn't fail because it was cheap. It failed because it got too hot. Which brings us to the silent killer, and the reason it's silent. Underinflation. A big rig runs on 18 tires, and most of them are mounted in pairs at the back, on axles and trailers the driver almost never lays eyes on. When the inner tire of one of those pairs slowly loses air, there is no wobble, no noise, nothing the driver can feel from up in the cab. That tire just quietly runs hotter and hotter, mile after mile, until the belts finally peel off. That is exactly why gators are so often trailer tires. It's the position where a slow leak can hide the longest before it kills the tire. And for decades, the way drivers checked was to walk down the truck and whack each tire with a little bat called a tire thumper, because a flat tire sounds different from a full one. But here's the problem. A thumper can tell you a tire is completely flat. It cannot tell you a tire is 20% low on air, which is more than enough to destroy it. The only thing that actually catches the killer is a pressure gauge on every single valve, and a huge share of the tires rolling down the highway right now are running underinflated simply because nobody put a gauge on them. And this isn't a small risk. The government found that a vehicle running tires 25% underinflated is 3 times as likely to be involved in a tire-related crash. Now, here's where the retread myth completely falls apart. When researchers actually went out and collected gators from highways across the country and had tire engineers examine each piece to see what kind of tire it came from and why it failed, the results flipped the whole story. One federal study found that of the debris they could identify, 78% came from brand new tires, and only 22% came from retreads. which roughly matches how many of each are actually on the road. Less than 10% of the failures could be traced to the retreading process at all. The top causes were road hazards and poor maintenance, underinflation, overloading, and abuse. The exact same things that destroy a brand new tire and a retread alike. Now, that doesn't mean every retread is equal. A cheap retread from an uncertified shop genuinely does fail more often. But a quality retread made in a certified plant from a good casing fails no more often than a new tire. The villain was never retreading. It was always AIR pressure. So if retreads aren't the problem, here's the fact that should end the argument for good. The next time you fly somewhere, watch out the window as the plane touches down. Those tires, slamming from a standstill to over 150 miles an hour in an instant, holding up a machine that can weigh as much as a building, are almost certainly retreads. Around 80% of all commercial aircraft tires in the United States are retreaded, and the airlines and the military have run them for decades. A single airliner tire casing can be retreaded 10 times or more. Some have been recapped 17 or 18 times. And this isn't some budget corner cutting. It's because most of a tire's cost, and most of its engineering, lives in the casing, the body of the tire, not in the tread on the surface. Throwing away a perfectly good casing because the tread wore down would be like scrapping a car because the paint faded. So airlines do it, and so do school buses, ambulances, fire engines, and even the postal service, under quality control that would shock most drivers. Every casing gets inspected, scanned with lasers, and tested at 25,000 volts just to find a single hidden puncture. And the payoff is huge. Retreading a truck tire uses about 7 gallons of oil instead of the 22 gallons it takes to build a new one, and it saves the trucking industry over $3 billion every year. The retread you were taught to blame for the mess on the shoulder is quietly one of the most successful recycling stories on the planet. So once you understand that gators are a heat problem and not a cheap tire problem, you start seeing the real story everywhere. It's why the shoulders fill up with rubber in July and August, not January. Heat season, it's why your own car has a little glowing horseshoe symbol on the dash, the tire pressure warning light, because underinflation is dangerous in anything with tires, and your car can warn you in a way a truck's hidden trailer tire never could. It's even in why the myth refuses to die. A shredded, ugly gator just looks cheap, so the eye instantly blames a cheap tire, even though the tire it peeled off of was just as likely brand new. And it matters to you directly, because gators are the single most common type of debris on the road, and road debris is linked to tens of thousands of crashes every year. Hitting one at the highway speed can tear the underside clean out of a car, rip out wiring, and cause a wreck. So that 2-second swerve you do without even thinking about it is real self-defense. And it's the same humble truck you followed this whole time, the one that fights gravity down a mountain, brakes with its own engine, gets weighed axle by axle, and needs a car with a pole to clear a bridge. The one part of it most likely to leave a piece of itself behind on the road is the only part actually touching that road. A tire that got too hot because of one number nobody bothered to check, and that number costs everybody. When a tire lets go, the trucking company doesn't just lose the tire. They lose hours to a roadside breakdown and a service call, and they lose the casing, which can no longer be retreaded, throwing away the single most valuable part of the whole tire. Underinflation doesn't just cause gators, it quietly murders the casing's second life. And for every other driver on the road, those flying strips of rubber cause real crashes and real deaths. The maddening part is that almost all of it is preventable with a 30-second pressure check. That tire on the shoulder wasn't doomed in the factory. It was doomed by neglect. which is why the whole industry is now attacking the invisible killer head-on. New trucks and trailers increasingly run tire pressure monitoring that reports every tire's pressure to the driver in real time, so a slow leak can't hide anymore. Some trailers now have automatic inflation systems that tap into the truck's own air supply, the very same compressed air that runs the brakes, and constantly top off any tire that starts to drop, holding it at the right pressure without anyone ever lifting a gauge. Fuel-efficient tires are being built to flex less and run cooler, and better casings are being engineered specifically to survive multiple retread lives. The entire direction is to take the one number that decides a tire's fate out of human hands, because the data could not be clearer. The gator was never a rubber problem, it was an AIR problem. So the next time you pass one of those black strips lining on the shoulder, you'll see it completely differently. It isn't proof that some fleet was running cheap tires. It's a physical record of tread separation, a tire that slowly got too hot because it lost air that nobody measured and then peeled itself apart at 70 miles an hour. The retread you were taught to blame is the same technology landing airliners and saving billions of gallons of oil. And that gator on the shoulder isn't the ghost of a cheap tire. It's the ghost of a number nobody checked. And those dirty rubber flaps hanging behind the wheels, the ones you've genuinely never thought about once in your life, they're doing something far more important than they look. And one of them hides a strange piece of trucking history you would never expect.